Welcome to Red, White, and Blue. From the right, I'm Gary Polland.
And from the left, I'm David Jones.
Tonight we welcome Harris County's District Attorney, Pat Lykos. We've been here a number of times. You're a great guest, and we're happy to have you again, kind of to report to David and I representing all your constituents.
That's right.
Well, I'm delighted to be here.
You're the DA for all people, right?
Absolutely.
That's good. And Gary forgot, of course, to tell people that you were once a Houston police officer, that you were a district judge for umpteen years.
And she's also a lawyer.
Yes, so you get to talk about all of these experiences, Judge DA Lykos. Okay?
Yes, sir.
So let's start with Pat Lykos, the reformer that we see in the courthouse. So I'm going to brag about you a little bit. What you have done, as I understand it, and please expand on your progress that I don't know anything about, you've changed the way we file trace amounts of cocaine in the courthouse.
Right.
You have changed the filings in juvenile court. You're diverting a lot of people to home confinement who previously were incarcerated. In addition to that, you are diverting people charged with driving while intoxicated to treatment programs. Is this you, Pat Lykos, or is this that big umbrella committee that Judge Cosper is in charge of where you sit? Who's responsible for these things?
I'm responsible for the DA's office. And I want to talk about everything that we're doing to keep Harris County safe. We're the third largest county in the nation. And our population is about 4.1 million. We have 34 municipalities. The unincorporated area, if it were a city, would be about the size of San Antonio. We have about 1,800 square miles. You contrast that with, say, the state of Rhode Island, which has 1,500 square miles, about 500 of which are underwater. And, we're the global energy capital. We're a hub of transportation. We have the port, we have the airports, the trucking, railroads, science. We have NASA. I mean, we are the petrochemical industry.
So you're the district attorney for the Chamber of Commerce, it seems.
Well, I'm telling you the magnitude and how wonderful it is. We have the best job in the world, and that is to protect the people of Harris County.
Well, but my question to you is directed at how you have contributed to reducing jail costs, rehabilitating offenders in a different way than any other district attorney. And so my question is, given that you also serve with other people to accomplish these things, how much of these were your initiatives versus the committee that Judge Cosper was appointed by Commissioner's Court to implement?
All the initiatives in the district attorney's office originated in the district attorney's office. And our mission is to serve and to protect. And we created, for instance, the first cold case fugitive apprehension unit. And we have met with consular officials and attorneys general from various foreign countries, and we are extraditing fugitives who have fled not only Harris County in Texas, but the United States. And we recently brought back a pedophile from Thailand. We've created our child exploitation unit and going after pedophiles who use the internet to prey on our children. And elder abuse, we've created the animal cruelty unit and going after the dog fighting. I don't know whether y'all are aware, but dog fighting is pandemic here in Harris County. And parents bring their children. And can you imagine now, the parents are screaming with bloodlust, betting as to which dog is going to rip the throat out of another in the presence of their children. And then during intermission, they're buying crystal meth, trading stolen property, and so forth.
Gary,
I guess
a
great place.
I don't think Judge Lykos is proud of any of the three reforms that I talked about.
What I want to do is balance that off. Okay, because I want those jail cells filled with the bad guys and the bad girls. With respect to juveniles, what we have done is on first offenders, nonviolent. We do a risk assessment. If they qualify, they don't beat the ride downtown. Their parents or guardians then have to come downtown if they qualify, and we offer them a contract, David. And they're put under supervision, and they have to go to school, and if treatment is necessary, and so forth.
And I would say, Judge, when you got elected district attorney, you ran as a conservative reformer. And do you find in talking to community groups when you go around as a district attorney that the citizens are happy with all the things you've done? Because it's probably fair to say, in your year and a half on the job, you have done more things to advance the district attorney's office than has probably been done in 20 years.
Well, we have extraordinary people in the office. And what I've done is unleashed them, if you will. And so they have a sense of purpose, and they're very energetic, and everything is to do the right thing. You have to see what's to do. You know, leadership really honors everything, and dealing fairly with all is everything. So we see the right thing to do, and then we do it right. But it's the whole office.
You have this program called Divert, where your first offender DWIs
Correct.
are taken out of the prosecution system.
If they qualify.
Right.
There's a risk assessment.
When can we see the results of that program, positive results of that program, given that we now know that we are the leading county in the country for DWI fatalities?
Oh, we have to, that's why we created this program. We did an analysis of the figures, and lawyers were pleading out, especially young people, first offender, DWI, for time served in jail, and a fine, and they lost their license, and they'd go on driving, and you had that slippery slope, if you will, and then within a year they were recidivists, and then it was just downhill from there, no treatment whatsoever. So we've created a program where we do a risk assessment, and they have to plead guilty, 30-day sentence, a fine, and then they have to pay for the interlock in their automobile, and it could be for 6 months, a year, 18 months, treatment, and so forth. And right now we have 1,867 people in Divert, and only 2.6 have violated the conditions.
So the first offenders who may not ever have another experience with driving while intoxicated get help immediately, but those who are repeat offenders who obviously have alcohol problems, they don't get the benefit of the program. So how is that helping?
They can get the treatment in prison.
They can get treatment in prison.
Right.
In the fact, you got to start somewhere. Wasn't that the whole theory behind the program?
The whole theory is to keep from having recidivists, repeat offenders. And it's a pandemic in Harris County.
Well, you have 1,800 people that are on the Divert
Right.
program, Judge, that have interlocks
Right.
in their car, which means they can't drive drunk.
Right, and they can't have somebody else blow into it either because there's a camera there.
Oh, so under the old system, like you said, the 1,800 people, they'd take their 10 days, they'd be out driving again and drinking, and who knows what would happen.
Right.
Well, what is your office doing for those who are repeat offenders who are the people who are killing people on the highways are not the first offenders, they're the three-time offenders. So what are we doing about them?
David, what I'm trying to do is to prevent people from becoming a second, third-time offender. All right? Those others who have had their opportunities and not taken advantage of it need to be in prison, and they can get the treatment in prison or in jail.
There you go.
Yeah, well,
Prison still works for some people, apparently, yes. So
there has to be consequences.
I have a political question for you. Because Gary sometimes interrupts before the end of the show with political questions, so I want to do it. There's only one way anybody runs against Pat Lykos in the Republican primary, and they would say that since you took office with the turnover, that the office has lost 400 years of prosecutorial experience with those who have either quit or who were run off. As a result, we don't have capital convictions anymore, and of course we are still the DWI capital. So how do you turn this image around that you lost so much of experience and now you got all these young people who can't do the job?
You're a fountain of disinformation and misinformation. And if you look at prior years, our numbers on capital murder are identical. And we had 2 death penalty cases last year. We've already had 2 death penalty convictions this year. Life without parole has made quite a bit of difference as to whether we prosecute and seek the death penalty or not, and in the jury's decisions. So, no, there hasn't been a dramatic change.
I think
then if you look at the turnover, Mr. Jones, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
That's quite all right.
In prior years, there's no anomaly there.
I'm not
there's been
complaining.
turnover forever. I mean,
I'm not
people
complaining.
come and go.
We lost a lot of people. Some of them.
We didn't lose a lot of people.
Well, 400 years worth. I counted.
That was 4 people.
Yeah, that's right. They should have retired long ago. Let me ask you about this.
I mean, well, you compare it with Dallas, where they fired 40 people. I mean,
Yeah, it is. I mean, when she came in, she picked her own high command. David, do you have a problem with that? Okay. County hiring freeze. Every county agency is under a hiring freeze. What has that impact been on your office?
It's had a terrific impact. and our people are coping. But to understand the magnitude of what our problems are, last year we had 50,000 felonies filed, okay? 81,000 misdemeanors, almost 8,000 juvenile petitions, and in justice courts, 431,000 cases. So almost 600,000 cases our lawyers handled. And we have positions for 300, and of course we don't have 300 now, we're about 286. And we're down on our investigators and our support staff.
I don't see you making claims publicly that the Commissioner's Court is standing in the way of public safety by not allowing you to put people on the payroll. So, I mean...
There's going to be a mid-year review in September, and you will hear from me.
Aha. So whether it's lifted or not, this hiring freeze, you will be heard from in September. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay.
Asked and answered. I was going to ask you, Judge, though, in line with the hiring freeze and the goal of trying to reduce jail overcrowding, does the fact you have a hiring freeze and not being able to fill all your slots slow down the ability of the office to do things like following up with victims and things that have to be done prior to a case being disposed of?
Yes.
So that means we're keeping people in jail longer because you don't have the personnel to do things, and that costs the county money too.
Well, we're working overtime. We've had a lot of academic interns in and unpaid positions, and they've discovered what indentured servitude is. Our family has risen to the occasion, but you can only work at this pace so long before you have diminishing returns. And we have to have a full complement of people because our population is growing.
Well, do you think that the issue with, and I understand the county is under some budgetary constraints because of the economy, the Obama economy we're all dealing with. Do you think that there needs to be a smarter way of looking at how the county saves money?
Yes.
Okay, and that, I guess, will come when you get to make your presentation.
Well,
you'll save money by spending money.
Why does government exist? It's for protection, right?
Public safety is number one.
To maintain law and order internally and to defend your borders. And that should not be the first place you look to cut is public safety. And we do have to invest some dollars in diversion programs so that we can make our county safer. And with respect to the jail, through our trace policy, we have reduced, which is also a due process.
Please explain that, trace policy.
What it used to be is that if officers found somebody and they had some mucus extruding from their nose and it had a flake on it and they took a Q-tip and tested it and it tested positive for a drug, they would be arrested and taken to jail. The only problem is the evidence was destroyed by that test. So what we've said is that you need to have a minimum of 1/100th of a gram. To give you a comparison of that, that's what sweet and low is. Or
like
whatever.
One piece of sweet and low?
1/100th of that packet.
Oh, okay.
That's the minimum that can be tested twice.
That's not a lot.
So what's happening now is we're getting arrested now for possession of greater quantity of drugs, because what I want is a person who sold the drug to the person who had the flake in their nose, all right? And the person who supplied that to the person who sold it. So we want to work our way up, and we want to cut the head off that snake.
And, of course, there were plenty of people that supported your position in this new directive of how you file those types of cases. But one group that wasn't satisfied were certain police officer organizations, and you promised, as I remember, a review in 6 months. I think that 6 months is up. So how are you finding their attitude towards your policy now, and what's the support for the policy now?
Well, rather than looking at attitudes, we're looking at results. And arrests are up for more serious offenses, including burglary.
Well,
this frees some manpower. Mm-hmm. And what I want to do with people who are publicly intoxicated is that they should be taken to a detoxification center. You know what it takes to arrest somebody, transport them to jail, book them in jail, have all the evaluations that you have to have in jail and so forth, and then the release process. It's very, very complicated. It's cumbersome and labor-intensive and time-consuming.
You're talking about officer time, right?
I'm talking about not just the officer on the street who's taken out of service for an extraordinary period of time, but the people who work in the jail and the entire process. Whereas if we could take them to a detox center where you'd have EMTs there and where they could sleep it off, and we would determine whether they need treatment, refer them to treatment, and perhaps have some caseworkers there and get them off of their addiction.
So when a former opponent of yours was here recently, Mr. Bradford, I asked him this question. Pat Lykos, I said, has basically decriminalized small amounts of cocaine. Yet we continue to see officers taking people into jail with all of the waste that you just described for just grams of marijuana. And they are pleading out and getting convictions. Why don't we stop that practice at HPD? So what about you saying to HPD, let's do something else with that crowd of people?
Mr. Jones, I want to make it perfectly clear. I did not decriminalize anything. It was a due process issue. The defense has as much right to test a substance as the state has. And under the old policy, the evidence was destroyed. That is not due process.
So, in speaking of
if you want to decriminalize, that's a legislative agenda.
And that's what I wanted to move to.
Okay.
Legislative agenda. Do you have some recommendations to our legislature
Absolutely.
of how to be more effective?
We are probably one of the top centers for the diversion of pharmaceuticals here in Harris County, and we need a doctor shopping bill. And we need to be able to police the physicians and to police the pharmacies and to be able to prosecute people who obtain multiple prescriptions of opiates, if you will.
You know, people that are basically buying prescriptions, by buying the prescriptions from the doctors and going to multiple doctors to get them.
Absolutely,
okay.
Yes.
What else you want to see done?
I want to see a total rewrite of the mental health laws. As you're well aware, they're in various statutes and codes and so forth. They need to be in one place. And one of the things that I would like to see is that people who are placed into a mental facility because they're a danger to themselves or others can't check themselves out in 3 days. We had that terrible case of that woman who was in Harris County Psychiatric Center for a few days and left and then murdered her husband. Well, she wasn't there long enough for any medication to take effect. There was no real analyses and examination of her to see whether she represented a danger to herself or others. We've got to have a total change. We've got a wonderful county attorney's office. They have a guardianship program. I know that you all know people that say, I don't know what to do. I have this child, I have this nephew, I have this uncle, whatever it might be, and they have these severe problems, and no one will help me with it. And if we do get them put into a facility, they're out within 24 hours or 3 days. That's got to change. Plus the mental ill. Excuse me, I'm sorry. I keep interrupting you.
I thought
well, she was still talking about her legislative program.
I'm going to recommend something to see if she has it in her mind to think about, which has to do with restorative justice. Your office is now finding that people are being in need of exoneration because of corrupt criminal convictions. Evidence that was analyzed in a flawed way. We had one guy this week, 27 years, just eyewitness identification went bad. So the question is,
there's now 2 this week.
There's 2 this week. So, and congratulations for your conviction integrity unit. Yet, we both know that in the bad old days, it was white judges, white prosecutors, and white juries. And that list of people that are in the paper this week are all black guys. How many more need to be shown justice, and why don't we go to the legislature and try to get a mechanism established so that those folks who were wrongfully convicted, whether it's Dallas or Harris, can get attention paid to their cases?
I guess there's not a question you're not going to demagogue. There's not to be, that won't be multifarious, right?
That's the only questions he asked.
Okay.
Have you never seen an all-white jury convict a black guy? Of course you have.
I'm trying to remember. Most of the juries I had were not exclusively all white, no.
And so my question is, in Congress this week, they passed a statute that equalized the sentencing for crack cocaine versus regular cocaine.
Right.
That was disadvantaging thousands of black males. All right?
But see, so
let's start. When do we get apples and apples?
When do we?
Orange.
Here's the last part of the question, Judge. We have a mental health court.
It's a filibuster.
We have a drug court, and we have a veterans court. Why don't we have an expungement court, a special writ of habeas corpus court, to hear these claims?
Can we take one of these questions one at a time, please? It had absolutely no basis in science to have such a disparity between powder cocaine and crack cocaine in punishment. And the unintended consequence was because most dope dealers are bigots and they pick on neighborhoods that are not wealthy and have destroyed those neighborhoods, then you had more people of color who were arrested, yes. But that wasn't part of any cabal. That was just the federal government, as usual, not being rational and not looking at the consequences.
And now they're trying to address it, and I'm saying...
And they should. But we don't have that problem here in Texas. And David, I want you to understand the role of the district attorney's office are many and complex. It is our role to protect the right of the accused at the very beginning, during the investigation, during the prosecution, and then post-conviction, while we are simultaneously vigorously prosecuting the guilty. But in addition, it is up to us to prevent crime, to reduce the crime, and to suppress the crime. We're the #1 constitutionally law enforcement office in Harris County. So as you think of our traditional role as prosecution, it is far more than that.
All right, Lynn, speaking in terms of role, I wonder what Pat Lykos' advice to the state of Texas would be in dealing with law enforcement and illegals. What should we do? Well, obviously, it's going to be an issue in the session.
No.
Maybe not with the ruling on Arizona. It may not be in the session.
The states have to have the federal government assume its responsibility and perform. And it is their role to secure our borders, and they have failed abysmally. And the people that I know back in the old days who were with INS or who are now with ICE, they're very diligent and hardworking, but they have to obey the orders that come down from Washington, D.C. And I'm very concerned now about not devoting the resources needed to apprehend and detain criminal aliens.
Well, why don't we detain those that are involved in the drug trade? And right now the demand is in the United States. We're supplying the demand for all of what's coming across our borders. And if we said to marijuana users that you're going to get a fine only and took the profit out of marijuana, wouldn't we be making great steps to stopping the drug trade?
May I take your question one by one? You're absolutely right. The demand is here, and anybody who uses illicit drugs has blood on their hand. Every person who is beheaded, every journalist who is kidnapped and murdered, it's the responsibility of the people in this country who use illicit drugs. Now, if they want to legalize drugs, that's one thing. Don't use them unless they're made legal. And I am not advocating legalization. We don't need to poison ourselves any more than we already are.
Well, it's an ounce of marijuana in Nebraska is just a fine. I mean, in Nebraska, are they weak on crime in Nebraska?
I thought that was corn silk.
Another reform that Gary is proudest of that Harris County is about to implement is the public defender program. Are you looking forward to dealing with a public defender with equal resources to you who can challenge you in a way that you have never been challenged as an office?
Of course, that presupposes a number of assumptions that aren't true, but that's fine.
There's going to be a public defender's office.
Why should David change?
That's true.
I mean, are you looking forward to this, or is it something that worries you because you'll have a serious, dedicated office in opposition? As opposed to now, you have these, a lawyer here, a lawyer there.
So now you have to break this question down. The first question would be, do you think that the defense bar that your office deals with on a regular basis is unprepared, without the adequate resources, and doesn't give good representation of the defendants? That'd be the first question.
I can tell you, as a judge, one of the biggest problems I had were I would appoint wonderful, really experienced, dedicated defense attorneys, and then the family would go hire somebody who was not competent. And so the defense bar is like the civil bar, family bar. You have excellent lawyers, fair to middling, and you have very poor lawyers. What I'm concerned about is I want the defendant to have effective representation. We don't need these cases reversed because of incompetent counsel and then have to retry them again. And that's all I care about. So whether it's public defender, whether it's appointed, it doesn't make any difference to me as long as there's accountability.
Except when you ran
But excuse me one second. Don't say that equal to us, because they do not have the responsibility to prevent crime or to suppress it or to reduce it. Okay?
No, I don't think the budgets need to be the same in order for them to be equal to you. But as advocates, with a support staff, with mitigation specialists, with an appellate division trained to represent.
Are you going to get a word in edgewise?
Yes, I guess it's fair to say, Judge, when you were running your court, you appointed good lawyers.
Absolutely.
And you gave them all the resources
they
needed.
drove me nuts all the time.
Yes.
I mean,
And so all you did is have to ask. So David's friends are looking, I call it a solution in search of a problem. It's not there.
I don't have a dog in that hunt. Whether it's appointed counsel, whether it's public defenders, I want them to be effective.
We started off with dogs, and now we're ending with dogs. Judge Lykos, thanks for being
our time
here.
up already?
It is.
Yes.
Thank you. Come again,
Yes.
please. And you,
Thanks, Judge.
you out there can see a follow-up discussion of tonight's show by visiting us at HoustonPBS.org, at Red, White, and Blue at that site. So check that out. And until next time, get informed and get active.